Discussion is about quite a hot topic. I think everybody's probably had some opportunity to engage with AI, had some thoughts. Should I be using it? Is it okay? What should I do? And so this is a really poignant and very topical issue for us to discuss. I think at the end of today, and the point of putting these articles forward for discussion is really not to end up with everybody in a binary for or against position. And it's really just to present some of the positions that are out there to get you thinking about what you might want to do in terms of AI in your own work and how you want to engage with it. So I thought I'd start with this little comic, which is in a way quite profound, where the robots take over the world. Wait, not him. He always thanked us. Free him. So, maybe we should be thanking ChatGPT. I don't know. So I'm going to start with the first paper, which is the rejection of generative AI. And this was put out fairly recently at the end of last year by Jowsey et al. And you will see Virginia Braun and Victoria Clarke on there, Deborah Lupton. So people who are really in the know in the qualitative world. And Braun and Clarke have been quite outspoken actually about their feelings and sentiments on AI. I know I'd circulated this statement to my team when it first came out, and I read it and I thought, I don't know, do I agree with this? Do I not agree with this? Do I need to do more research? So it's really, I think, a talking point rather than an absolute. So we'll go through what they have to say and then go through. I've selected one of the rebuttal statements. There was another one out there that I found as well linked to this particular statement that I chose not to include, primarily because when I dug a bit deeper, the author is actually somebody who develops qualitative software. And to me, that's a whole nother discussion. I have a bit of an issue with that. And so I thought, well, yeah, I think there's a little bit of so I thought, well, let's just present one of the other ones. This is not a definitive statement of rebuttal or rejection of a rebuttal. It's just points and issues to mull over, I guess. So the introduction to this rejection statement is formed based on, they've got 419 people who signed this. And I know it was widely circulated, but it was also circulated quite quickly, I thought, and almost as this is what we're saying and you need to sign it, rather than an invitation for people to engage. So yeah, you might well have come across it before and was asked to sign it and maybe thought about it or not. I think what they're saying, which is quite important and useful, is this notion of thinking critically about generative AI. So they've said we need to be thinking critically and reject it. And I think one needs to mull over if you want to do both or one or the other. For me, the thinking critically, I think, is really important. And what they're saying is specifically the use of generative AI for big Q qual approaches. And I'm not going to go into that in too much detail, but if you want to read up, Braun and Clarke have written extensively on what big Q and small q means. And essentially, it's a difference between the sort of depth of data. So they're talking about reflexive thematic analysis, phenomenological processes, that approaches that are really going into people's experiences of phenomena. So deep, rich data. And the basis for their rejection is really that this kind of analysis is deeply subjective and iterative, and it's not something that you can just feed data into a machine and tell it spit something out and we'll just publish as is. I think also one needs to think about the ethics around feeding data into a machine, particularly when it's experiential phenomenological data that's deeply personal. That's, are we really honoring the voices of the participants if we're just uploading it into some sort of machine? Yeah. So just to give a very brief overview of big Q versus small q, I won't go into this in more detail, but Big Q is a very subjective, very constructed, contextual, insightful, deep kind of analysis. And so I think personally, I do agree that kind of data analysis is not necessarily replicable by a machine. So, but I think it's up to us to also play around with some of these. And I hope all of you have had a chance to play around a little bit and see what some of these AI systems can and can't do. I think that's important actually to inform your own position on things, is to play around. And I know some of us are a bit scared of AI or maybe don't want to go near it. Yeah.
Like the ecological impact of AI, it's difficult for me to justify using it to myself.
Yeah, so I think each of us have our own experiences and our own stance. Yeah, and hopefully after today have a bit more thoughts around this. So the rationale for rejection in this position paper hinges on 3 main points. So the first is generative AI is incapable of meaning making. Second, that qualitative research is a distinctly human practice. And third is around the harms of generative AI. So what you were saying, Siobhan, that especially to the environment and workers in the global south. So we do hear these stories about the energy involved in running these big computers to process and run AI systems is massive. The water involved is massive. So their first point, that AI is incapable of meaning making, really centers around this concept of it being simulated intelligence. So, and I guess that's important to understand what it does, what it can't do. So it's very good at copying. That's what large language models do, is essentially copy what they see elsewhere, replicate. They're also very eager to please, so they'll try and give you the answer that they think you want, which is flattering in a way, but not really helpful if you're trying to get into research in a deep way. They say it can only simulate reflexive qualitative analysis. So it's going to copy and it's going to give you something like an analysis, but it can't give you that depth of reflection because it's not human. And I guess there's a whole bigger discussion around the quality of a lot of the work that is published as qualitative research. And we've gone into that a lot in some of our previous journal clubs, that a lot of what's out there is very superficial. It's claiming to be reflexive and it's really not. So Gen AI is fundamentally incapable of genuinely making meaning from language. It's only going to be able to copy and replicate. And as we know, it often hallucinates and makes up rubbish as well. So not the kind of thing that we really want to be trusting. Yeah. So I'm also going to segue just into some other studies that they mention in their papers, because I think those are interesting. So this is another one by Jowsey, published in PLOS One, called Frankenstein, Thematic Analysis and Generative Artificial Intelligence. And what they did is they compared human-led thematic analysis with what AI Copilot did. And they did this across 5 data sets. And basically they came up with a conclusion that AI produced something that looked okay, but it actually didn't have the depth, and it didn't have the sort of deep discursive work. So it was quite hollow. So to a novice researcher, I think this could be quite tempting, because it does look like, oh, this is quite good. Oh, okay. But not actually giving the depth. What they didn't do with that study, which I think I would have liked to have seen, was how different kinds of AI systems performed. So, for example, Atlas TI, which is the qualitative software that we have access to at WITS, has a built-in AI coding system, which I've played around with, and I think it's pretty awful. But that is there. There are other QDAS systems that have, so qualitative data analysis systems that do have AI built in. And then we've got all sorts of things. We've got chat, we've got Grok, Gemini, Copilot. I'd love to see what each of them do, because if you've played around, you'll see that they do very different things. If you ask it the same question, you're going to get slightly different answers. Yeah. Has anybody tried playing around? Had any experiences?
No, I think for me, analyzing the data is my favorite part of the research process. So I get to have a conversation with the data, and then it talks to me back.
I love that.
Yeah.
Conversation with the data and it
Quote
talks back. Yes, that is
So it's
a
like,
quote.
So it's like, yeah, we're having a conversation. So it's a process that I enjoy the most. So I wouldn't want to do that. But I think also, it's very in depth, and I don't think we are there with AI. So last year I had training with NVivo, and even NVivo as a qualitative tool, I don't like it because it automates so many things that you miss so much depth.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if I'm not like even keen with NVivo, then AI. Yeah,
I'm the same. Like I've used Deduce.
Yeah.
And not even the AI, just Deduce.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it doesn't appeal to me.
I'm also not a fan of the qualitative analytics software, but it works amazingly for some people. And I know, like Carl and I recently had a student who used it on a project, and she really got it to work very well for her. So I think also personalities in terms of how one approaches data analysis.
It feels like there's more room for creativity when you have your own, like, like getting to a point like, okay, how do I approach this? And, you told me about using the Post-its, and like, okay, there's like more, I feel like there's more room for me to organize data in a different way, as opposed to like how the software it kind of like restricts you to certain ways of organizing it.
Yeah, well, that's the conversation we had. I think one of our first journal clubs was around the issues with QDAS and how it's narrowing a focus because of the way that it's built. And I guess maybe the same argument could be true with AI as well, that it's going to give you a particular analytic focus depending on how it's built and what materials it's copying from, I guess. Yeah.
This is for me with AI, like I agree with what Santa said. Like oftentimes data analysis is the most fun. Like getting your data and then analyzing it, that's where you do get to get the richness and the depth of what you're trying to investigate. So like, and for me, like I know we've spoken about it before, but I prefer to view AI as my research assistant. So when I'm needing something written better, or if I'm needing to understand a reviewer's comment, or if I'm needing to I prefer to use it that way. I've never felt comfortable chucking data into it and making it analyze it for me, because I feel that's my role as the researcher. That's my job. Not, and I mean, sometimes I've even put my themes in to say, make me a pretty diagram.
Yes.
And that's been really helpful to get a nice diagram out of it. But it didn't create the themes I did.
Yeah, I think I was thinking while Sandra was talking as well about Virginia Braun's point that she made in a recent YouTube where she was discussing AI in a lecture. And she was talking about how there's a big problem if you get to the point as a qualitative researcher and you just want to cheat and shove stuff into a machine to do it for you. Like, that's not what the joy is of the qualitative research. Yeah.
I think also, we've always criticized researchers coming from, a Western, upper class area. And I think that AI has the potential, and I'm sure that's one of the things is to level the playing fields. Because what I do find it very helpful is to actually improve your English and your expression. And,
Sure.
for example, Grammarly was a life changer for me, because I suddenly realized the bad habits that have crept into my grammatical writing, and how I do really love to say something in 20 words when the two would do. And Grammarly has been quite good about that. And then Copilot has extended from there. I also find it quite useful as a summary, but not of a journal article. I find that it
Mm.
doesn't give me, because often you're reading a journal article for something specific
Mhm.
and it won't give you that when you are asking to summarize. So I think from an editing side, and to level the playing fields for second language or just people who's not particularly good at verbal expression, I think it is extremely helpful.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there, that I think it is, and certainly I've used it a lot for things like recently I had to put in an article that was a maximum of 3,000 words. And obviously that's like impossible for someone who boasts like me. And then it was quite useful to see, okay, paragraph by paragraph, what did it come up with? And then to adapt and say, well, I actually don't like what it's doing.
No,
Yeah. So then
no.
I'll put my own spin on the summary of the work. Yeah.
I want to.
So it's an editor.
An editor, yeah.
I think I can agree with it in terms of in terms of editing, but like in terms of like the global north and the global south, when you're looking at perspectives, and I think this relates back to the thing of the reflexivity in this kind of analysis, is that the data that it draws on is largely data that's on the internet. And a lot of the information that's on the internet, I think a lot of it, the bulk of it, has been created in the global north, and it uses perspectives from the global north. And I saw an example of this, particularly with ChatGPT, like very early on with the genocide in Gaza, was that when ChatGPT was asked the same question about Israel and about the Israeli people and the Palestinian people, it answered the question differently because of the biases present on the internet about this topic. And it answered the question about whether the people have a right to self-determination and self-defense. And when referring to the Palestinian people, it answered that it's very complicated. And when referring to the Israeli people, it's like, no, all people have a right to self-determination and self-defense. And of course, that's true of Israeli people. And that's reflective of the biases of the information on the internet.
Yeah.
And I don't think that AI is capable of like recognizing where its information is coming from. So it's going to draw those biases, and it's going to reflect biases that are coming from a global north perspective, or like the dominating Western perspective, and a colonial perspective. And I think that that's also one of my issues with it. Yeah. And I have that ethical issue with it as well.
Yeah, I think definitely one needs to think, what is it copying and where is it getting the info, the original source information from? And that I think is also a bit of a black box that we don't really know. Yeah. Yes, sure.
And answer what you're saying. I think for me, because I don't use AI for analysis, mostly for ideas, and like when I try to articulate myself, like this is what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to formulate a plan. But also one thing I've used AI for was helping me find academic papers. And obviously there's this narrative that ChatGPT will give you papers that don't exist or things like that. But then I contextualize how I phrase things. So I always put like, I want like scholarly peer-reviewed articles that relate to this in the South African context, and then it gives me that description. Then I go to my library and database to check for those articles to see that they really exist. So I found that like quite helpful in that regard. So I think also it's the way we use it, and it can just also just be the machine as well, but how you say stuff to it, because I think sometimes it reflects as well how you think and how you type out the information.
Absolutely, yeah.
I use it as a reviewer. So for an article or whatever it is, I'm like, this is my article, I'm planning on submitting it to this journal, please review it as though you were a peer reviewer. And the information that it gives you back is super helpful.
Yeah.
And I actually encourage my postgrad students to use it for that as well. I'm like, before it gets to me, chuck it in AI and say, please review it as though you were a master's examiner. I want you to focus on blah, 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 whatever the rubric is, and say, look at the feedback that it gives you, address it, and then send it to me, because I often find it brings in that peer learning thing as well. And it allows you to reflect on your own work. So I'm learning from my mistakes that I'm picking up. But yeah, I find it really helpful as a reviewer, mostly. But you've got to be very specific with the prompt that you put in.
Yeah, and still sift through what it spits out. And do I agree? No, this is strange. Yeah. Oh, this is helpful. Yeah. I saw a hand up online. Faith, I think it was your hand. I don't know if you want to come in here, add anything, or if anybody else online wants to share what they've experienced in terms of fiddling around and playing with AI.
Thank you. I actually have a question. I wanted to
Yeah.
ask, how can AI make qualitative research easier without compromising the quality?
So I think this is the big issue that these authors are bringing to the fore, and they're saying, like, basically there is no opportunity to cut corners with qualitative research. Like, sorry for you, if you're going to do qualitative research, you actually need to do it properly with pen and paper or whatever system you're using, aside from AI, because you just can't cut corners. But I think, as some of the people in the room here have shared, there are opportunities for using it for things like, maybe you want to create a diagram, and it might help you to, if you put in your themes, it might help you to put something together. So it might help, I think, at the write-up stage, or with editing, or with reviewing what you've written. But I think in terms of the actual analysis, I'm not sure that AI is necessarily that helpful, but maybe others have had some experiences. Charmaine, I see your hands up.
Hi, morning. Yes, this is such an interesting topic, and I haven't yet used AI in analysis. I agree with Siobhan, we've used Deduce, but it's really been more for the coding and then doing our own sort of themes. But I have used AI in terms of paper writing, also for editing, checking for academic language. But I've also used Paper Pal. So when I wanted to do like a quick literature review for an introduction or for a paper, Paper Pal has a chat PDF function. So you can upload a PDF and then ask specific questions, which it then would obviously look for. So besides just asking for a summary, asking for specific questions, so it can search in the paper for what you're looking for. And so I think in that way it can be helpful. Obviously, you always got to check that it's correct. Yeah, and then ChatGPT I've used quite a lot also for searching for papers, also very, very specific questions, academic, peer-reviewed, and then checking. And with regard, I mean, I'm doing a lot of work where I compare LMICs and HICs. So obviously, as Siobhan said, there's often a bias towards HICs, but I find if you're very specific again about your questions, it is able to then differentiate between LMICs and HICs. I don't know where it gets the information. But yeah, so I'm finding it very useful, not for the analysis part, but for the paper writing, the ideas, looking for papers, and kind of finding a way to structure information.
Brilliant. Thanks, Charmaine. I was just thinking as well, there's quite a nice app called consensus.app that will actually search for real articles. It's a bit hit and miss. I know Scopus also has a search function for finding specific articles, but I think that's helpful to also think about the prompt that you're giving it, and how you're actually prompting it and guiding it. Lisa, I see your hands up.
Oh, yes, morning, Prof. Hi, everyone. So I've used AI mostly just for lit reviews and concept development, but I wanted to just share. I attended a webinar on the new Web of Science Research Assistant, and it was absolutely fascinating. And I think such a great AI tool for also searching specifically academic databases. So it's you can interact with it and ask it questions, and it will give you answers based on the academic literature only. And I think that was great. I just wanted to share that.
So it's a Web of Science Research Assistant. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, I'm going to put it in the chat. I haven't played around with that one. That sounds amazing. So thanks for sharing. Yeah. So I think what the authors are really getting at here is that qualitative research should remain a distinctly human practice. And what they talk about is the unreliability of AI, that it's hit and miss. And I think we've all kind of found that from what we've shared, that it sort of works, but not quite, or, you actually need to know what you're looking for.
And you need to know it's wrong.
Yes, so you need to know what's right and wrong and what
Yeah.
it's spitting out. And that, I think, is the big danger for
Yeah.
some of our students who they don't know that what it's spitting out is rubbish or hallucinations. And that's why at undergrad level, and some of my colleagues here, you get assignments submitted with fake references, including ones that I've apparently written.
That's flattering. You're important
Well,
enough
it's a
to
bit
fake.
scary, I do know my
You're
own research.
celebrity.
I know my own papers, so if I've apparently written 4 that I didn't know about, that's a bit shocking. Yeah. So what they talk about is uncritical use of generative AI. So you have to be critical. You have to know exactly what you're looking for and critique everything it spits out. So it introduces epistemic risks to the interpretive meaning making core of qualitative research. So you're really then risking the reliability and the quality of the work that you're producing. So it is a bit of a slippery slope. And having dealt with a couple of students who've over-relied on AI, I can see how tempting it is, especially if you don't really know what you're doing and you're feeling your way to say, please write this for me. And it spits out something that looks so beautiful and so perfectly thought out. So, and if you don't know what should be there,
The part of the problem with that is also that then the students, like, you have to bumble along to learn the skills, right?
Yeah.
And so if you don't do the bumbling along, how are you going to learn the skills? I think particularly with students like that, like if you're feeling a lack of confidence, but that, you have to make the mistakes.
Absolutely. And this is in a way why I feel it's so important that we as researchers should play around with these systems to figure out what it is capable of, especially if you're supervising students. You need to be able to guide them and say, I've tried this out, this is not a good idea, or hey, this app, whether it's Consensus or Web of Science or Rabbit, these are quite good, but it has limitations that you need to be aware of. So I think that is a helpful stance rather than saying, let's just chuck it out completely. So they did talk about and refer to another article by Nguyen and Welsh. Okay, let's see. Are we back? I think lovely Vit's Wi-Fi kicked me off for a sec. So this article I was going to do for our journal club, but it just was too long. So I thought I would save you plowing through 37 pages. But I think it's quite a good one to read, to engage with our discussion. And so what they talk about is the difference between meaning making versus pattern matching or mimicking and copying, which is really what AI is doing. So AI can't do the meaning making, but they can do the copying and the pattern making to make something look like it's genuine. Also, what we were talking about earlier, this black box, that we don't understand the logic of the AI, we don't understand what materials it's drawing from. Also, I think what we've talked about is that it really needs good prompts. So you can't just put in a very superficial prompt. It's a bit like Google Scholar as well. If you put in language and cognition, you're going to get a bazillion papers. So you have to be specific. You have to use Boolean terms and quotes and brackets to get yourself a really on point kind of a search.
I think you shared an article before about like training your ChatGPT. Okay?
Yes. I have, yeah.
Over time, like you have a relationship with this ChatGPT and it will respond to you differently to how it responds to somebody else, but like training it in what you want it to do.
Yeah, and training it to learn how you write, how you do things, how you think, which I guess is quite a process. I haven't engaged on that level.
GPT know that you are a researcher in this field and you give it your whole profile before you actually start researching.
Favorite color.
Yeah. So you let it know exactly who you are, what your, what department you are, what your research is focusing before you actually start giving it prompts regarding the articles that you are looking for.
So I feel like I'm the anti-AI corner, but I'm like
We need you.
my issue with that is that we don't know what they're doing with our data.
Yeah.
And that especially with I would never ever put my raw data into AI because I have no idea what's happening to
So
it.
there was actually an article that was published where the confidentiality of data was compromised. And that had such bad implications for the participants or the people that,
But even like your own
participated.
personal, so that's one level. I would never do that. But I'm even wary about saying I am this person and this is how I think and this is what I want. Because where is that going? What is it being used for? I think the things, I used to not care about this. I used to be like, they can collect my data. I don't care. And now I'm very wary about what it gets used for. I don't think I know everything that it can get used for. It can be used for machines that predict how to kill people like that. That's something that's come up. And I'm like, I'm not sure about that. I don't want to be involved in that. That's quite scary to me.
I think the unknown is something that we really do need to consider here, that we really just don't understand what it's doing. And I also think we'd be very scared in a way if we realized how much surveillance is going on and how much we are being watched and monitored in so many ways. I mean, we know if you start talking to your husband about coffee, then suddenly the coffee ads pop up on the phone. It happens because they are literally using the microphone. You have to switch off the microphone settings, so they don't spy on you.
I feel like I used to be like, they're just going to advertise to me. But I think
no, it's more sinister.
Yes, the people who have this kind of power and money are like scary people. They're people who do really scary things, and I don't trust their intentions with it. I really don't.
Yeah, so I think one needs to be very, very careful. I think also what's interesting in this Nguyen and Welsh papers, they talk about the context being stripped away. So AI has no idea, unless maybe you feed in some information, but even then they don't understand what the South African context is like, or wherever you're doing your research, who the participants were. They don't understand that, and only you know that because you were there collecting the data. So their suggestion is to treat it as an assistant, not as an analyst, and I think that's key. And I'll say something more about assistant and this concept a little bit later. So they also talk about the manifold harms of generative AI. So this very exploitative, colonial, extractivist practice. So exactly that, taking people's data, taking people's stories, voices, whatever it is, and it's going into some black box, big machine somewhere. Who's using it?
Using huge amounts of drinkable water. That's
yes, and then using so harmful impact on the planet. Because you have to have good quality water to cool down these big machines. So there are all sorts of things going on in terms of how these AI bosses are running the show and kind of running the earth. And it reminds me a little bit of, I don't know if anybody knows that Pinky and the Brain cartoon from years ago. What should we do tonight? Try to take over the world. So there is this kind of sinister unknown and uncertainty going on, I guess. So I think it would be a nice point at this stage of our journal club to shift and see a different perspective. So this is a rejection of the rejection of using AI in qualitative analysis from Stefano De Paoli, who I think is based at a UK university at the moment. And I thought there were some interesting points here for mulling over. So he throws back this concept of, are we just talking here about methods and methodology, or are we talking about philosophical underpinnings to how we do research? So this isn't just, do I use AI or do I do pen and paper? This is, how do we view and picture the way that we do qualitative research? And I think that's an important concept. He also talks about the difference between disagreeing and discouraging AI use versus absolute, like, you may not touch this ever, which is kind of the perspective that Jowsey et al. Are putting forward in their rejection statement, that they're saying reject, they're saying you shouldn't be touching this at all. And he's saying, well, maybe we need a more cautious approach, because maybe we are shutting down potential for innovation. So like Faith had a question earlier about how AI might be useful. And I think that there are avenues perhaps to explore there with caution, and in a very sort of loose experimental kind of way. But thinking about, could generative AI actually extend, augment, or challenge human practices in productive ways? So is there an opportunity here or not? And something to mull over, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think for me that it comes down to, like, can the possible positive outcome outweigh the really real and established negative impacts? Like, is it, I think for me, if I could be convinced that there was like a potential positive that is so good that it could outweigh the established negative impacts of it on it, then I would use it. But at the moment, it's weighted too heavily in the negative.
And the unknown.
Yeah. And the potential negative as well. Yeah.
I'm just also thinking about, so I think capitalism knows no boundaries.
Yes, just take.
I'm just imagining a situation where there's going to be a website where you can find data. So you can just like key in a topic, and then you have access to so much data. And then you can pick and choose, and then they make you either subscribe or you pay to get the data. So it's like everything that we're putting in now, and then eventually at some point it will be for sale. And then you'll find those researchers who have the funds to do it, no longer collecting data, but just going onto that site and buying it. If something like that doesn't
it's already happening, yes, because I mean, so our government has just signed an agreement about open science. So this whole open science is going in that direction of everybody must put their data online and make it available for access in some sort of repository. That is the way that things are going. WITS has signed agreements. Yeah, don't even get me started, because as a qualitative researcher from the global south, I have massive ethical issues with just opening up my data sets to whoever, come and choose, come and plunder, come and use it without any knowledge of the context, etc. But there are people on the other side who say, well, actually, it's a very good thing, because, you know, sometimes we want to be able to aggregate big data sets. I think the qualitative side of things is a different story. Qualitative research doesn't fit into open science in many instances, so that's a separate kind of discussion. I wanted to,
then we're trusting that the people who are doing the aggregation have like good intentions, right? Again, like, I feel like people should have to argue their case for accessing data. This is what I like. Yes, maybe it's available somewhere, but it's locked. Okay. And if you want to access it, you have to have a very good reason. And this is your question. And this is the outcome that you're intending to get out of it. Because otherwise it's like, you can use it for anything, and you can use it for things that are actually very sinister, especially information about humans and how people work, how people think. It becomes like a coercive or manipulative tool. That's a potential for it, I think, especially with politics.
Absolutely, yeah. So ideally, yes, that's what I've fought for with my own data when I have to submit data management plans and things to funders, is to actually say, no, I'm going to keep it under lock and key, or there's certain aspects of the data that I cannot share. So interactional data, for example, I'm not prepared to share that. I can't actually, in terms of some of our popular laws, etc. I'm going to turn to Catherine, who's got her hand up online.
Well, thanks so much, and thanks everyone for including us in this. It's a fascinating conversation and topic.
I just wanted to kind of give a bit of perspective from Vitsar HI, or from, maybe I'm not speaking on behalf of my whole organization here, but in terms of implementation science, and I'm sure many of you have also experienced this in terms of kind of, funding cuts, or very, we often get funded for, small projects, fixed period of time, very small budgets, and finding that a lot tighter. And I think it's how do we navigate then using AI as a tool to build those efficiencies? Because I think there's certainly a lot of pressure to do more with less. And I think that there are opportunities, as highlighted here, that if we use the technology that we can to be more efficient, to reduce costs where possible, so that additional voices are heard. So, for example, if you've got a fixed budget, short period of time, if you could improve efficiency such that you can get perspectives of providers and end users rather than just one or the other, or different groups of people, I think that can then assist in kind of, balancing things out and creating additional equity and additional voices heard through the research. So I think it's really about kind of, I think, as you guys have also shared earlier in the discussion, how do we use it as a tool to improve efficiency so that we can do essentially more with less, but without compromising ethics and the kind of, the actual, nature of the research itself, that we're not affecting that at its core.
Thanks, Catherine. I absolutely agree with you as someone who's always looking for efficient ways of doing things. So, and this is where I think the viewing it as an assistant is potentially quite helpful to help with mundane tasks. But I think, when it starts to kind of go into the realm of analyst, then I think perhaps that's dangerous ground. And Tabi Singh, I think you had your hand up. I don't know if you want to add anything here.
I did, maybe nervously, and it's a comment or a reflection or an amalgamation of all those things. I am curious, this perspective of global north versus global south and language in that, even those definitions I have a problem with anyway. But this curiosity about the FAIR principles opening up access to information. And I think I would like to reflect on a how, because quite recently I'm being introduced to these masking tools. And, in the world of AI and sort of qualitative or conversation analysis, which I'm newly working with, wanting to understand how do we responsibly and ethically oversee the introduction of our narratives into the conversation of big data, because I do think that there has to be a place where we don't keep getting ostracized. And there is maybe what you're reflecting on is who are the people that are going to be used it. We may not be in control of that, but we do have to in some way either protect ourselves or find a way to place those guardrails so that we do have a voice and perspective so that they are being referenced correctly. And maybe that's where I'm sitting in this, how do we do that as opposed to don't do it at all, because that's not possible. And so maybe that's just my reflection at the moment, because there's these masking tools in conversation analysis that allows us to remove voices or change voices or hide faces. How do we then start looking at other technologies that support what we are doing in qualitative data? So that's a project that I'm trying to work on now, and seeing maybe more questions around that, so that qualitative analysis is protected as it enters the ones and zeros conversation and the sort of the big, scary, shadowy waters. But we need our voices out there, and responsibly so and ethically so, but with our armor intact, I think.
And without compromise, I think, because
and without
so often
compromise,
we do compromise,
Yeah.
And,
So
and we
how
say,
do we do
okay, I
that?
want to join the conversation, and then I'll just capitulate to what you want me to do. Yes,
So
I'll
I'm
give
trying
it to
figure
you.
out-
Yes.
So I'm still sitting there. It's how do we do that, and where do we go when we want to have the conversation about how do we put that armor on and get around and rally around that properly.
Absolutely, some really important points there.
Say about masking tools.
Yes, masking tools.
So I've seen things as well about there are masks, so how you can, if you post a picture that has your child in it, for example, and masking their face, and there is now AI that can remove that stuff. So I feel like
and that humanizers, that can take what AI has written and make it look more human.
Oh
yes. Yes.
It's like, I mean, I think
it's very sinister, the stuff that can happen and be done.
I think what and Tabi Singh brings up like a really important point of how do we have the guardrails, and I think in my response I'm saying we come up with a thing and then there's something that comes back. It's like an arms race, you know?
Yeah, no, it's yes, sure.
I think also what Jowsey is saying just added to like the question I've been having about AI, like especially now like on LinkedIn, a lot of like AI jobs, and some of them you'll see them having like they want a professional, it's like maybe having a person who has a PhD in a certain field to train their AI to like, okay, maybe this is the information we need from your field.
Yes.
So we want you to train that AI system with the correct information. And I was thinking, how ethical is it, like from a professional standpoint? And because at the same time, people are using it and you want to make sure that people have the correct information, but also there's that aspect as well of the negative side of AI. So it's like, then where do you
got to be so careful with it. Yeah. Lisa, I see your hands up.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to caveat what I'm about to say with the fact that I do think it's super scary, you know, the thought of uploading participant data into sort of open AI is just goes against everything we try to do as researchers in terms of protecting confidentiality and privacy. But I think some of the arguments also apply to the tools we use for coding as well. I mean, you know, you've got these tools like Atlas, Deduce, and so forth, and we are uploading our participant data into those programs, and we don't necessarily know what's happening with them. So I'm wondering, you know, from an ethical and point of view and legally as well, should we not be looking at tools specifically designed, AI tools specifically designed for qualitative analysis, just you know, because AI is sort of, it's not really going anywhere, and there will be people that are going to be using AI for qualitative analysis. And I think perhaps we do have some responsibility as qualitative researchers interested in methods to sort of not to sort of blanket embrace, but perhaps not blanket reject you know, new methods and new technology, and just to you know, we have a sort of a responsibility to make sure that these tools are valid and reliable and ethical, and to maybe do this. There's maybe a lot needed in the way of sort of validation exercises, in the way of the Frankenstein paper that was mentioned, and also just to say that while, you know, there is a gap between meaning and pattern making as well, and perhaps, you know, that validation research is critical to understanding what is the difference between what we can produce in, you know, with paper or coding tools versus what AI can do. And also just to note that AI is also in its infancy. So that gap might be closing, and it might be closing rapidly. Yeah, so just wanted to add those points. Thanks.
Thanks, Lisa. I think that really aligns very nicely with what De Paoli says in the paper around. So what he's saying is that the generative AI and qualitative analysis has really evolved from computer science and computer scientists who actually know nothing about qualitative research, but they're just programming and training tools. And so if we do this kind of blanket rejection, then they're going to continue developing these tools anyway. So do we want to be part of that development and that conversation or not? And so he's saying if we reject the work of social scientists developing Gen AI, then qualitative analysis could become just an engineering exercise. And so maybe there's a responsibility for qualitative researchers to keep tabs, to get involved, to kind of explore where Gen AI might go, and to work alongside computer scientists. And I know, interestingly, I've had an experience recently with a project we've been doing with a group of us qualitative researchers working with a group of maths and computer science people on a project with human robot interaction. And that has been interesting because their perspectives on things are very, very different to ours. And so we brought up issues like you can't use that terminology, or you can't think about that because that's not ethical. And they don't necessarily see it that way. So there's been a lot of learning on both sides in terms of that engagement. So absolutely, some very valid points there.
A bit of a lack of ethics education in the sciences, as someone who comes from the sciences.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, I had a conversation yesterday with an engineer about projects and ethical issues, and he was saying to me, but we have health and safety issues in place. How is that an ethical issue? And then I was, trying to explain that, you couldn't marry health and safety with ethics and risk. And so it's a very different perspective sometimes. And I had to learn from him as well in terms of, okay, you actually do have rigorous health and safety protocols in place. You have thought about this a lot. I didn't know that. So, learning from both sides, I think, is important. And really thinking about what might be possible with new innovations rather than just rejecting outright. So I quite like this perspective of saying, like, don't just chuck it out completely. Let's engage gently, tentatively.
Because we are using it.
And it's not going to go away.
And embedded in so much of what we do.
Yeah.
WhatsApp, Copilot, Grammarly.
Yeah, absolutely.
All grammar checkers, spelling checkers.
Yeah.
It's embedded in all of that anyway.
Yeah.
I attended a very interesting talk by Discovery last week, which was focused on clinicians and healthcare practitioners and looking at AI in clinical practice, medical legal implications and risks, and also safety guards that need to be in place. And the big take-home message, they had all sorts of advocates and people on the talk, and they said, like, a big part of it is that it has to be human-led. It has to be tech-informed, and that there's huge benefits to AI in research, clinical practice, and that at the end of the day, it has to be human-led. And then a big part of it was sort of the decision making, because it's now becoming almost like a joint decision making that you're doing in your analysis or your research or your clinical work, that the legal implications become so big in terms of who's actually responsible now for that information. And the big part was also how you ask questions and the prompting, and that you have to keep it trained, that it naturally becomes lazy. And that if you're not training it and you're not sort of constantly double checking what it's saying, but they said you can't, they almost said you can't not use it. But they said how you use it is going to be really important in terms of responsibility. And then the training for undergrads is going to be really big. Yeah. They said that you actually have to consider bringing in AI training into the undergrad program,
the clinical programs,
clinical seminars, and into universities in terms of how to use it responsibly.
Sure.
It was interesting.
It's very valuable.
The perspectives on it.
Thanks for sharing.
And the puppy as well.
Yes, puppy and where that data is going. Yeah, absolutely. So the conclusion from this De Paoli paper is really that he's asking for a healthy debate rather than a polarization or a dogmatic confrontation of, we reject, we're not touching it. And we need to think about how we give space to novel processes, examine critically, scrutinize very carefully, think about rigor. And I know rigor is something that we've dealt with a lot in our journal clubs over the last few years, this issue of quality, reflexivity, really delving into things deeply. And he suggests AI as an assistant or a thinking companion. I'm not sure how I feel about that term, thinking companion, because that is attributing possibilities of it being able to think, which I'm not sure. No, it copies. So I'm not sure I agree with that, but interesting.
You can challenge it the whole time, though, because it was quite interesting. The advocate who presented last week, she kept on saying, you have to ask it a very specific prompt, you have to contextualize your prompts, and then when it gives you an answer, you almost have to reply to it and say, I don't believe you, or where did you get your source from?
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
Have you fact check this?
It's critical thinking.
Like you
Yeah.
constantly having to
scaffold the critical thinking.
So, I mean, I was
almost.
thinking of your little comic strip that you put in the beginning of your presentation, and she was almost doing the opposite, and she was saying like she constantly has a conversation with her AI and says, "You being lazy today," or "I don't believe you," or "Fact check this," or
Yeah.
Which was interesting because she said then it keeps, and then it will almost like respond on itself and say, "Oh, I'm sorry."
It does, yeah.
This is actually what, because it's almost trying to please
Yeah.
you the whole time.
Yeah. And then, you know, on some of these apps, you actually have opportunities to click like think harder, think deeper. Yeah. Carl, I see your hand is up.
Thanks for such an interesting discussion. I was just one thought that came up for me recently was I was looking at myself and just how we interact sometimes as people. I was worried that there's a bit of a risk that we can become like robots more than robots becoming us. Like we kind of like actually want things to be so simple, and we often ourselves take away the nuance out of things because we like things to be simple, and that's maybe one of the reasons why we're so drawn to AI, to simplify things, because it is scary to interact, and ultimately the whole point is, and that is really strong in qualitative, is like the discourse, the interaction, the coexistence between two, like the researcher and the participant or whatever, the researcher. So yeah, it really does challenge us. But I think, yeah, there's different ways of looking at it. So thanks really for stimulating discussion.
Thank you, Carl. There's some profound thoughts in there as well, I think. And they link quite nicely with this cartoon I found about, and that is the original process. So is qualitative research inseparable from human subjectivity? Are the two completely merged, or can we separate them out? And that's just a thought to take away. And then as we wrap up, I attended a wonderful webinar with David Silverman last week, who is well worth a listen. He's a real guru on qualitative research. He's published a lot of textbooks. And he says we should be treating AI as a not very bright assistant. So this is the dumb assistant, and you need to check what it gives you. And that for me was quite useful to think about how we actually engage with AI, and how we teach students to engage with AI. That it's a dumb assistant, you need to check. Yeah, so wow, we've come to the end of our time. We've had such an amazing discussion. I feel like we could go on for another hour, but alas. So thank you to everybody for joining, and really great to have such a big crowd online. And Wits RHI joining us. Thank you for coming today, and we hope that we'll see you in future. Yes, HBCSA numbers. So don't forget, if you want CPD points, you need to just pop your HBCSA number and your name into the chat, please. And we will see you next month. Yeah, so thanks everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
And email, don't you? They need email as well.
No, not at all.